You're offering the webinar again on Thursday, Frank?
Correct. Yeah, actually, we've have performed some of it already, so.
So we're recording, we're broadcasting, and ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, Tracy Wood.
Good evening, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited that we can actually finally launch this new funding program. And I really want to commend Armando Ruiz, our funding program director, who has really stepped up and put together this program.
Armando.
Yay for Armando, seriously. While trying to close the old system, which has been very, very much a challenge for all of us here. So, we did this because we want to make your lives easier. We hope after you see this that it will be easier. You'll still be thinking that, yay, it'll be easier. I do want to tell you that, and Armando will touch on this, but the training is broken into two parts. The first 20 minutes is for those board members who, all board members basically need to watch the first 20 minutes, and those who are signers and treasurers need to watch the whole thing. So at 20 minutes, we'll stop, and you'll have an opportunity if you want to exit at that point. You can do so. There will be a registration form.
Step from out in front of that. I mean, it's distracting to me. The
distracting?
baby's
Okay.
not distracting.
Yeah, sorry. If there's a registration form for you to use, to register, both online, and then we'll have it here in person too, that basically will note that you completed your portion of this training. That's going to be mandated for this new funding program. So, because we are in a short timeline, if you can hold your questions for the first part of the 20 minutes part, which is a lot of stuff about going over public fund that you probably already know already, there'll be a break. You'll see the questions and answers come in at that point. And that way, those who are on the webinar with us at 20 minutes, those board members can split if they would like to go with that. So, I would like to, if you guys don't know Armando, he's awesome, and everyone knows Betty too, right, Betty? NEAs, and she's awesome as well, and Steven, and Jose in the back, and it takes obviously a big team to make this work, and we appreciate that you're here with us, both in person and via the webinar. And so I'll turn this over to Armando to go ahead and get started. So thanks, guys.
Again, thank you everyone for attending this training. It's a very exciting time. Thank everybody on the staff as well that helped set this up. There's no way I could have gotten this all done without everybody's assistance. And I also want to thank you all for your valuable feedback as we were getting this new funding checking account system set up. We received lots of positive feedback, things suggestions that we considered seriously, and some of them we implemented based on what we were able to do. So, like Gracie mentioned, it's divided into two sections. The first 20 minutes for all board members, and then the subsequent, the remainder of the hour would be for the treasurers and the signers to get down into the more specifics about the new forms and the processes for doing the funding. So let's go ahead and get started here. Oh, and Betty asked me to remind everybody to turn off cell phones or put them on vibrate, just to make sure that the people on the webinar as well get a valuable experience with minimal interruptions. And if anybody needs to use the restrooms, they're right outside this front door, just to the left. So let's get going. And again, if you can be so kind as to hold the questions till each section, it'll be delineated where we can do some Q&A, just to make sure that we get through this in the hour that we set aside, and try and stay on schedule. Okay, so real quickly, this is the roadmap that we have. Under the general overview is everything that all board members need to know. The purpose of this NC checking account system, a little bit of an introduction on the neighborhood council system and the funding flow, responsibilities for the treasurer, the signer, as well as the board members. Some information about the annual budget, how we're going to handle expenditure requests, the new process by which we'll track board approvals, issues of conflict of interest, which are pertinent to every single board member that votes on funding matters, and then a list of allowable expenditures and prohibited expenditures. And then we'll take a quick Q&A after that, and we'll head over to the treasurers and signers section on how to set up the NC checking account, or what are the steps involved in that. The introduction of the new forms, the cash request form, a funding request form, board vote on funding requests, doesn't make a lot of sense yet, but we'll go into it. The new online bill pay feature for Wells Fargo, some information about the debit/charge card that comes with Wells Fargo account, the monthly expenditure report that's going to be required to be filled out, and then some information about neighborhood purchases grants. I know a lot of you are familiar with them already. This talks a little bit about some of the changes and how they'll be handled in the new funding program, neighborhood improvement projects as well, and then a final little note about inventory. So let's go ahead and get started. Everybody knows this from several of our trainings. It's one of the overarching goals and missions of the neighborhood council system. It is to promote more citizen participation in government and make government more responsive to local needs. So let's just try and keep that in mind as we discuss some of these expenses and what's allowed and what isn't. In terms of a general introduction for any new board members, some of you may not be familiar, we do have 95 neighborhood councils represented all throughout the city of Los Angeles. The Department of Neighborhood Empowerment is actually a very small department that works with these 95 neighborhood councils to resolve a lot of their issues, in particular for me, the funding element. Now, what we currently have in place is the demand warrant process, in which the neighborhood councils submit requests for payment to the city, and we have to look at all the documentation. We have to enter this information into a city's payment system. We have to deal with a lot of controller requirements and city requirements, and it's very cumbersome, and given the staffing levels that we currently have is unsustainable. Okay, so this checking account system that we're introducing for this new fiscal year allows the NCs to take charge of issuing those payments to vendors. So it's removing a big chunk of the process and time. Instead of the document sitting with the department while we're trying to process it and get it through the system, we will give you the power to issue those payments. Okay. And in addition to that, we're also setting up for a future possibility of NCs receiving grants and donations in the future. So this is kind of like the first step as we look into those changes in the ordinance and how we can implement that to further, fund you guys and get you guys going on your missions. The funding staff, as a result, will be refocused to performing auditing and compliance work. Instead of 60% of our time right now is spent reviewing documentation, processing checks for payments, following up on those check payments, and getting back to you on documents that are missing or information that's required. We're refocusing on the tail and auditing to make sure everything is in accordance with the rules and the guidelines that are set, and making sure that it's in compliance. So currently the neighborhood councils are allocated $37,000 for the fiscal year. And these are public funds, and as such they have rules that are attached to them. We have to be very careful to safeguard those funds. So given that we're providing more flexibility through this NC checking account system, we did make this additional step of requiring all board members to be trained on the funding process. That way, more people are informed about what's allowable, what's permissible under the funding guidelines, and the board can kind of keep an eye on itself as well. Okay, so September 1st is the deadline for all board members to take the general funding overview training if they want to participate in any votes on funding issues. And they also have to take an ethics training by that date as well. Okay, so Here's a brief overview of the new flow of the funding program. So it starts with the department in the city of Los Angeles. Every neighborhood council is given an allotment of $37,000 per fiscal year. In the first month of the fiscal year, which will be July, we'll be giving $4,000 seed money to each neighborhood council into their own Wells Fargo checking account. So the board then, has their meetings and decides what to spend their funds on. They go through the approval process. The treasurer becomes the authorized person they make sure that the forms are complete, that everything is attached to the document request, and then they authorize the signer in this case. And we'll talk about these roles a little bit in the next couple of slides, but the treasurer in this particular funding flow would authorize the signer to expend those funds from the checking account. So the signer goes online to the Wells Fargo checking account, issues an online check to the vendor, or for use of the charge card, they swipe the card, pay the vendor. So the vendor receives payment and obviously provides the signer with all the receipts and documents that they need. The signer then is responsible for returning all the documents and forms that they receive from the vendor to the treasurer for the compilation of the monthly report. The monthly report is presented to the board, and the board approves the list of expenditures, and then the documents are submitted to the department, and then we start the process all over again, submitting a lot more cash into each NC account. Okay, so we have this introduction, and this is actually based on a lot of feedback from neighborhood councils, this idea of dual responsibility. So in the previous version of the funding program, the treasurer and second signatory kind of, depending on each NC, the treasurer may hold on to the purchasing card and draft all the demand warrants and do all the payments, and the second signatory may be just the signer, or in some cases the second signatory is the purchase card holder. And it was kind of a little bit up in the air about who did what. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this balance of responsibility between the two board members who are responsible for processing the funding for the group. So the treasurer and the signer share these responsibilities of administering the checking account. And this is an internal check and balance to make sure that the funds are being spent appropriately. So there will be two key roles in the funding process, and it's up to the NC to decide, the treasurer and the signer which duties they'll be taking on. So the first role, so to speak, is the one who handles the reporting responsibilities. The monthly cash request form, the funding request form, the monthly expenditure report, any supplemental cash request forms, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And also, this person would be responsible for presenting these forms and these reports to the board, so being the voice of the funding element to their own board. And then they also have the role of authorizing the cardholder to pay their vendors. And then we have the role of the cardholder. They'll be responsible for issuing online check payments to vendors. They assume the sole custody of the charge card. They expend funds from the charge card. They collect and safeguard original invoices, receipts, and payment documentation, all the documents, and they submit it, and this is important, timely, to the other party, whether it's the treasurer or the second signer, so that monthly reconciliation process can take place. So obviously in this circumstance, each neighborhood council has to find those two individuals who will be able to work well together, see how this works, and either switch the roles if it's not working a particular way, or find an additional party who can handle this. It's really recommended to have these roles separated just to make sure that the process is safeguarded and there's transparency in the funding. Okay, so I talked about dual responsibility, but there is an additional element of responsibility, which is the board in general. Okay, so each neighborhood council board member is is charged with the responsibility of making sure that the funds in the checking account or out of the city's appropriation account are used appropriately, they comply with the rules and the policies and procedures prescribed by the department. Every single board member on the fund, that votes on the funding items, like I mentioned before, must attend the NC checking account overview training, which is what we're doing right now, and they have to understand the funding process. And again, there's the deadline of September 1st. If a board member has not taken the training and the ethics training as well by September 1st, they will be ineligible to vote on any funding items. This won't, by the way, affect any quorum for meetings. This is strictly just to vote on funding items. And in addition to that, each board member's responsibility is to understand the conflict of interest law. So most of you have taken the ethics training, so they understand how the conflicts of interest have to be taken into account when you're participating in funding issues. And obviously, it's a lot of information. So if you're unsure of whether you might have a conflict of interest on a particular funding issue, contact the department, contact the office of the city attorney, and if all else fails, just remove yourself entirely from that funding item, just to be on the safe side. Literally get up and leave the room. Don't discuss, don't pass the motion, don't second the motion. Don't sit there and making faces at others, nothing. Just get up. It's for your own best interest and to ensure that if this funding item is important to the neighborhood council and you want to get it passed, just it's better to leave the room. Okay, let's talk about the annual budget. Most of you are familiar with the budget. It's used as a strategic financial guide to conduct activities that will help the NC achieve its goals. Again, going back to the overarching idea of promoting civic participation and making government more responsive. So the budget, we have a template online, and a good budget breaks down the expenses into. We actually introduced an additional category this fiscal year. We have operating expenses, outreach activities, neighborhood improvement projects, neighborhood purpose grants, and the new category, election-related expenses, which used to be couched in the outreach activities. The budget should be provided in a standard format, templates online, like PowerLA, and it must be submitted in order to participate in the funding. So the deadline for this year is July 12th to submit an approved budget for fiscal year 2013-2014. Should be accompanied with a board resolution signed by the treasurer and signer, or agenda and minutes showing the board action, and the current board roster. There's also a strategic plan online under the budget submission page on our website. Please take the time to complete it. We are requiring that as well. Just as a very useful and essential tool to make sure that your budget reflects the plan and the goals of your neighborhood council. Here's a sample of the existing budget. Like I mentioned, it's broken into major budget categories, and then there are subcategories that you can break it down. And feel free to provide any more details on specific neighborhood purpose grants, etc. If you know you have a regular event annually, including it in the budget is beneficial to help you plan ahead for any expenses. Okay, let's talk a little bit about expenditure requests. Okay, so all expenditure requests must be approved by the entire board and identifiable under one of the approved budget categories. So the department always looks at that to see if these expenses fall under one of their categories. All requests to the board for funding must be made on a standardized form, and we'll go into that under the treasurers and signers portion of the training. But it is a new form, so that any request for funding that comes to the neighborhood council, we now become the gatekeepers to authorize that and report it this form. For recurring or monthly operational expenses, utilities, phone bills, things like that, it is okay to approve it once, and identify it as a recurring monthly expense, so that you don't have to keep voting on it every single month. I gotta pay my phone bill in July, I gotta pay my phone bill in August, and just, it doesn't make sense. So, for those recurring operational expenses, a one-time approval by the board is sufficient. However, for outreach, neighborhood improvement projects, neighborhood purpose grants, and election expenses, they should be approved per request. Each outreach event is unique, each request is significant. And same with the neighborhood purpose grants, you shouldn't have, I think we all pretty much already approve NPGs on a per grant basis. Okay, so in addition to that, prior to issuing payment for a board approved expenditure, you do have to submit certain of these categories to the department for pre-approval. Okay, and I'll show you the form where that'll be handled a little bit later. But just know that for neighborhood purpose grants, regardless of the dollar amount, the department does need to review it first, and then we'll provide you in an estimated 5-day turnaround time and authorization to expend the funds, assuming everything has been submitted properly. Same for neighborhood improvement projects. Contracts, everybody's familiar with contracts, they do require more time and processing, so those need to be submitted to the department prior to issuing payment. Leases as well. NC sponsored or co-sponsored events, and any expenditures over $2,500. Okay, so this is a little bit different from the prior funding program, because obviously everything before was submitted to us for a request. The $2,500 was the threshold amount for the purchase card. Now it's the threshold amount for any expense that we need to pre-approve. And keep in mind, you cannot split payments to circumvent the dollar threshold. Okay, no first payment, second payment, installments, phases, anything like that. Only special accounts set up by council action will continue to be paid via demand warrants. So, under very specific circumstances, we will be processing demand warrants if council authorized the creation of a special account because of transferred monies for a particular purpose. Okay. So there will be an additional form now to track the board voting results for each funding item. This will take the place of the board minutes and resolutions that were previously provided. So this will be a uniform document that tracks every single person who voted on it, whether they were present, they were voted yes or no, they abstained, they were absent, they recused themselves, or they were ineligible because they didn't take the training or because they're under the age of 18. All of that will be tracked, and it will be a nice clean document to confirm the appropriateness of the voting action. And the treasurer would be submitting this document, or the person responsible for reporting will be responsible for submitting this document to the department along with the monthly expenditure report, or if they need pre-authorization, then it will come along with that information. Okay, a little bit about conflict of interest. And I'm going to read this one because it's pretty specific. The Political Reform Act states that no public official shall participate in or making or in any way use his or her official position to influence a governmental decision in which the official has a material financial interest. Okay, so again, if you do have a conflict of interest, you would be disqualified by this law for in acting in any way on this funding issue. You have to recuse yourself. Again, get up, leave the room. Don't talk about the motion. Don't suggest anything to anybody. Just say you're leaving the room, you're recusing yourself, and then just come back after the vote has taken place. And again, when in doubt, contact the city attorney's office or the department. Okay. In regards to allowable expenditures, the purchases of equipment, supplies, and services must be for the sole purpose of building the social capital of the neighborhood council to benefit the community. So I underlined social capital because in the previous version of this PowerPoint, everyone said, well, what is social capital. So, you know, it's a very, you know, everybody has their own interpretation of this, but social capital, at least as it pertains to the neighborhood council systems, is the extent in which the NC's relationships with their community have productive benefits. And if those benefits and those relationships forward the mission, which again ties back to that first slide of promoting work, citizen participation in government, and making government more responsive. So here's a list of some allowable expenditures. I'm not going to really read them one by one. This will be available online. But just note that all of these are different types of services, and when we talk about allowable expenditures, we have to specify that these services are provided to the neighborhood council in furtherance of their goal. This is not paying someone to provide a service to someone else for some issue or that. You know, there's been a lot of confusion and misconception about that. These are services to the neighborhood council. Okay, so we have business services, communication services, professional services, and speaking about professional services, I will point out that another misconception that's come across is this information was in the previous handbook, and listed under professional services you have things like schools, charitable and social service organizations. Now this is not to be confused with the Neighborhood Purpose Grants Program. This is not paying a school you know, directly from your NC checking account for computers or I don't know, sports equipment or something like that, okay? Or providing a donation to a social service organization, okay? That still has to be done through the NPG process. What this professional services is specifically saying is if any of these agencies is providing an actual service to the neighborhood council, such as renting out a room to you for a meeting or an event, or providing chairs, or you know, food or something for an event. You know, if they're providing a service to the neighborhood council, then it would be considered an allowable expenditure. Just to continue, the repair services is another category for equipment, things that the neighborhood council has in their inventory, things that need to be fixed or maintained. And retail services, which is a long category. From this group, I will point out anything to do with food. The neighborhood councils have to be very careful about how they spend their funds on food for events. So we have to keep in mind that these are public funds, and for the most part, for general meetings, you know, light refreshments is the standard. Something like finger food, snacks, water. If you do have a specific event where the food may be an important or critical element, contact the department first to review, and then we will look at it and see if there's a way that it can be allowed or approved. But in general, the rule is finger foods, light refreshments for general board meetings, etc. Okay, so let's go to the master fund list, the prohibited expenditures. So clearly, any expenditures that were made without the prior approval of the neighborhood council body, or that are not identified in the approved budget, would be not allowed. Payment of services over an extended period of time that may require personal service agreements executed by the department. There are some exceptions to those, like a post office box or things like that, but if you're unsure, contact us. Storage is one that does require a contract, so have us contact us and we can work with you to get that settled. Prepayment or advance payment of goods or services. So, and specifically when we're talking about this is requesting payment for to a vendor for an event that has yet to be determined, or something that's way in the future that really the services aren't being delivered to you at the time that you're paying for it. So contact us if there's a special arrangement that needs to be made, and we can look at it and see how we can work with you to authorize that prepayment. payment for transportation services or travel expenses. Split charges, like I mentioned before, using multiple transactions for, to circumvent the maximum threshold amount of $2,500. Again, donations of money or goods to individuals or groups. Grants, neighborhood purpose grants are the only ways that we can grant funds to 501c3s, nonprofits, and schools. Items or services from an entity that did not participate in a fair and open selection process. Okay, so this one's a little bit, it's a little bit confusing, but basically anything that's over $5,000, we do ask that you request 3 bids from local vendors. Okay, and if they may need a contract depending on the terms of those services, so contact us, and we can work with you to either obtain those bids or draft a contract. Any purchases and or capital improvement projects to increase the value of private property. Okay, so when you do community beautifications, keep in mind that it has to be on public property, city property, or if it doesn't benefit the general public, then you wouldn't be allowed to have it. Events or projects that do not have the required insurance and permits. Okay, so we do have a contact in risk management. If you're having an event, please contact us, and we'll work with the risk management assessment office to make sure that all the forms, insurance, and permits that are required get taken care of prior to your event, with as much advance notice as possible, please, so we make sure that we can meet your needs. Third-party reimbursements. Okay, we can reimburse board members. You can reimburse your board members from these new NC checking accounts, but it has to, the documentation has to show that a board member actually spent that money. It has to come out of their checking account, or they paid with cash, or they paid with a credit card, and then they would have to submit those documents to confirm that it was them. We can't do third-party reimbursements. Obvious one, purchase of alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or adult entertainment products. Purchases that violate the separation of church and state. You can't interfere with or endorse any religion using public funds. So, again, conflict of interest laws, anything that violates those conflict of interest laws. Opposing or supporting ballot measures, candidates. I know several neighborhood councils like to have candidate forums and things, and those are really, really good uses of the funds, but we just need to make sure that any flyers or the forums that are set up are open to all candidates and present an unbiased, sort of forum for discussion. You can't use the city's money to sue the city or any city entity. And if and when you're in doubt, please ask. So, if there is improper spending, okay, with these new NC checking accounts, the department, if we catch it, may stop the payment on a check, charge the fees to the NC's appropriation account. We may require the NC, if the payment has already gone through, we may ask the NC to get a refund of the money and return any goods purchased. If we're unable to retrieve the funds, the department would reduce the NC's appropriation by the amount identified as improper. So, $100 gift card, and it's gone, you can't get it back. We reduce the NC's appropriation by an additional $100. Okay. And then, depending on the severity of the incident or the series of incidents, other enforcement actions, exhaustive efforts, freezing of funds. The new ordinance does give the department authority to remove either the treasurer or the signer from this funding process. So just to keep that in mind, to make sure that you're working with us to ensure that everything's done appropriately. So that is the end of the general overview. If you're on the webinar, thank you for participating. And please go to the link listed on this slide, empowerla.org/board registration. to complete the form indicating that you took this overview training. And at this point, is there any questions?
I know you'll probably get into this in the next section, but are we going to have the ability to sign up for our accounts tonight as well? I know that, I got an email about that last Friday, but I didn't inform with me, or we can be able to do that tonight.
I can see if we can get through the forms.
I'll just go through real quick, just a couple more. Did you say July 1, we would get $4,000 initially?
I'm sorry, hold on. Can you repeat the question in case the webinar goes? They're actually having some glitchy sound problems, so I don't know if maybe CEO wants to play with it. Armando, you want to step aside and answer
Okay.
questions?
Okay,
But,
we'll talk loudly.
yeah, talk loudly. And then you mentioned that glitch with the card potentially too. Did you have any? I think I wasn't sure.
The debit card issue?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, in regards to your request to sign up, yes, we will have the bank applications available. If you didn't receive the email, or if you discarded it or whatever, you can come to the department. This goes for anybody else who is not present here at this meeting. Can come in and fill out the forms in person, providing to the department so that we can get the applications going. Really quickly, I will take an aside, Gracie mentioned. In regards to the debit card, we did encounter a glitch currently where the Wells Fargo bank representative told us that we'd be able to have a debit card linked to this online bill payment. However, they're having some issues processing that and ensuring that we are going to get a debit card. We're still working to resolve the issue, and it looks like we're going to be able to get that taken care of. But in case we are not able to provide a debit card for these checking accounts, we would continue with the U.S. Bank purchasing card, so that every NC has both a card available to extend funds as well as the online bill payment system.
And then in July 1, did you say we were getting the $4,000?
The $4,000 actually we will be putting in, assuming the documentation and everything is set up for a particular NC, they submitted their application, taking the trainings. Then actually it would be July 8th based on when the ordinance goes into effect.
And do you have to have your budget in order to get that money?
Yes.
Okay, so
That's all contingent upon everything being submitted and approved by the department.
Okay.
And what we would do is we would create a request in our system, in our city system, to have the controller's office transfer the funds into each NC's account. So I think it's like a 1 to 2 day turnaround, so maybe 8 to 10, that's it.
Okay, and I sent a response back about that. We want to have 2 second signers. Was that issue resolved? Like the treasurer be the first signer and have the second signature be our former treasurer as well as myself, or can we only have 2 people?
I think it would depend on the roles that like I mentioned, it's up to each NC to decide who is going to do what under this new system. We're only going to issue 1 card, okay, and that card cannot be shared, okay? So if you're talking about having 2 signers who may share the reporting elements or the forms, and, just putting their names on this, and we might be able to accommodate, but, as we develop the system, we'll be able to give a more confident answer on that.
Okay, and I have a question about you said it would not affect the quorum. Our bylaws say that if somebody has to not vote or not recuse themselves, but abstain from voting, that does affect the vote. So so it won't affect the quorum, you're saying, but it could potentially, if we don't have enough people who have taken the training, could affect our ability to actually approve something. Is that correct? Right?
Yeah, Casey, do you want to address that one a little bit? Sorry, that's a little bit beyond my.
So think of it, if you have board members that don't take this training and then they're ineligible to vote, it's kind of like you're a youth rep. If you have one who's under 18, they sit there and they're part of the quorum, but they're not allowed to vote. So if you take action by the majority of those present and voting, then you just need a majority of those present and voting. You still have quorum.
And voting, so they're not considered to be voting?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Just like a youth,
Just like a quorum.
right, just like a youth
Okay.
member. Right.
Okay. And, we had an issue with a 3-year hosting agreement, does that require a contract approval?
Yes,
Even though
yes.
it's like $300?
That is like, you're talking about the website hosting, like a GoDaddy type of situation?
It's exactly that.
Okay, so let us take a look at that, because technically you're not supposed to cross fiscal years when you make these payments, but I know that you save money when you do, but,
Significant amount.
I know, a lot of money, but, we'll have to work with existing city policies and procedures, because existing policies and procedures don't allow for crossing, fiscal years when we do payments, even though we've been doing it. But, yeah, we're getting deep down in now.
Okay, and the payment for transportation services, we were not able to do that for a long time. The most recent treasurer's handbook said that we could, and now we're not again, is that correct?
I don't know what is it, the previous treasurer handbook?
Didn't want to pay it.
There, we
It
had
hasn't, because,
a
I think in the last
liability.
4 years, you guys haven't allowed us to go to the main, before we would be able to pay for 1 or 2 board members to go to the, conference that you went to, that I'm here.
Are you talking about travel, or are you talking
No,
about?
transportation, like, from
Like a
a
bus.
local school to
Right.
a theater.
Okay,
It's
So-
a little.
That's
ways off
field
now.
trip.
yes, so I'm gonna look into that, because, we just came, Stephen and I just came back from MUSA. So in case for the webinar, people can't hear the questions, this question is on transportation and also on travel expenses and whether they're allowable. I think it's very useful for board members to go to MUSA, and I'm gonna see, I know, like, the citywide ban on travel was not just our department. And in fact, like Stephen and we pay for our own expenses to go. But I think that, I don't expect NC people to pay for their own expenses, so I'm gonna see if we can reinstate some type of travel for these types of conferences, because I think they're really important. As for transportation, I know we used to do it, there was a liability issue. I can take it back to city attorney and talk to our new controller, Bob Galper, when he comes in, and see if we can do something with that as well.
The way we've, on community events, particularly since they all require our name on a flyer under the rules in order to justify the expenditure, we've insisted that all of our community events are co-sponsored by the neighborhood council. Under your rules, that means virtually everything we do, up to $50 for refreshments, is going to have to come to the department for approval because it's a co-sponsored event. That's written. So basically, you might as well just take our entire, you were doing checks before, now you're gonna take our entire monthly bulletin and go through each expenditure item and approve it.
That's not the intent. The intent was, instead of co-sponsored items, not so much the food aspect of it, as it is a liability aspect of it. We just wanna take a look, see, make sure you guys are covered liability-wise, because we just had a few events come through in the last 2 weeks that were like major liability for the city. It required us to go to, risk management and actually possibly get more, insurance to cover it. So it's more that issue than it is about your food issue.
Well, but it's not even food, it's just like community cleanups,
Yeah.
Citizenship workshops,
Right.
virtually anything that's out there, peace marches. Well, technically, if we co-sponsor a peace march and someone falls and hits their leg, I mean, there are all kinds of things that basically you're gonna say you can't do anymore because they're co-sponsored.
Well, here's the
events.
thing, is that people are co-sponsoring, neighbor councils are co-sponsoring events where they're actually only just participants and not co-sponsors. So when you're a co-sponsor, you control that event, meaning you have some kind of power over that event. If you don't do something, then that event's over. With your participant, you have a booth, you have a table, you're there, like volunteering, and they called you a co-sponsor, but technically you're not really a co-sponsor, because if you didn't show up, then the event's not gonna go down the tubes, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the
Participants call the
participant,
co-sponsor.
if you're a participant, then we don't care, but the problem is that if you're called a co-sponsor, you shouldn't be call it proposed sponsor. It should have a special thing that says participant, because if you get sued, then this, guess who they're gonna go for? They're gonna go for the city of Los Angeles, because they're like deep pockets. So just be careful. What we wanna do is make that analysis and say, actually, you're not really a co-sponsor here, you're, participant. And so, just make sure that there's a distinction that is made.
Doesn't that depend on how much money we're putting in? Because I know in the past, they told us that we're co-sponsoring, if we're footing the bill for the event, we're a co-sponsor, we're the
Yeah.
actual sponsor.
Yeah.
So there has to be more.
Yeah, we have to do a little bit of a look-see on that, just because of some of the stuff that's come before us. And just know, our goal is not to make things harder for you, our goal is to make sure that we all protect ourselves. And so, if we can, in this process of developing these new funding policies and procedures, that we can come up with better ones, like this is what we have now, and I expect in 3 months, we're gonna review everything and see, okay, what can we now make better, given our experiences the last 3 months? And if that's something that we need to take a look at, then let's take a look at that, and we'll sit down with city attorney and say, this is just too cumbersome. How can we like make this an easier analysis so that you guys aren't stuck waiting for us to turn around and paperwork?
Okay, we submitted our budget, and now we got the thing, Jeff came over to Swank and gave us a strategic plan to, okay. Now, once we do this and we get some funding, can we still resubmit an adjusted budget? Okay.
Yes, you can always resubmit adjusted budgets, and you can, and even the strategic plan, if you're having a hard time getting that in first, get your budget in, and then, come and, follow up with that strategic plan. We know it takes some time to look at that, but we just want to enable councils to start thinking that way.
Well, we're actually trying to see if we can get it done
Okay.
because of Swank.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
It says, page 9, if certain people if people voting on funding have not taken the training, how will we know? Will the neighborhood councils get a list from you guys? Or
Yes,
what?
we will be notifying you, I can't say it's gonna be weekly, but we will be definitely notify you way before the September 1st deadline of which board members have not taken the training. You'll see at the end of this, we're gonna pass out forms, and you're gonna complete them, and then we're gonna upload it into our system, and we will upload it into our website too. You see our website has the, ethics training, we're gonna put the funding training right next to it. So you'll be able to know. Our biggest problem right now is not getting updated rosters. So you'll see when you do the board resolutions for all your funding stuff, that's gonna change, because you're gonna have to list every board member and how they voted on there. So now we will start to know who's on your board, and if they change, you have to make sure new board members update their information and, also sign this form.
So let's do a few more questions. and-
Like, just a real quick on the roster, now we send you guys on a regular basis updates, but we noticed that the system or your system does not get updated. So, that's the issue, it's not that we're not providing it.
Yeah, I think it was on both ends, and now we are trying to turn it around. We actually have rosters at empowerla.org that you can send changes to, and we will update that. We'll take a couple more, then we can
Yeah,
add in more.
one thing that's come up is the fact about prepaying for services or articles. There's a lot of vendors that demand, like, we want t-shirts credit, they want the money up front. And the other thing is like, if we want to rent a jumper for an event, they want prepayment. Or for porta potties also.
Yes.
So they want to get
That's okay. We don't have an issue with that. It's prepaying way ahead of time where something that might not get done, or, right, that's the problem that we have.
But
We
the
understand.
way it's verbiage, the way it says it, we can't pay
Yeah.
porta potty.
We'll clarify that, because there will be a manual, a full manual with all the rules that will come out, after, probably by the end of the month, this month. And it'll clarify just like how far the prepayment is.
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah, so, and
So it's
what it
imminent.
is, and just know that, like, are you talking about the jumpers where people jump around on the thing?
Where the little kids go in.
Yeah,
That's a
you're
big
not, that's a
liability.
huge liability, don't let the, the city attorney does not wanna hear about every council funding jumpers.
But the thing is, that we have to request from the police department for the jumper.
Okay, that's great, have
Get the
them,
G grant.
Then,
have them go and rent the jumper.
The way, the way it
Give
works,
it to- give it to their department.
yeah, and MPG grants the police department, which you
Well,
can't
not
do.
the department.
I mean, to the-
Like the, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
well, you know what I'm trying
yeah,
to say.
yeah, so, yes, please don't rent your.
I have two questions, or a question and a request. Okay. For, outgoing councilman for third district, Dennis Sine, is giving each of his neighborhood councils $50,000. How do we handle that? Where do we put it?
So like I mentioned,
Yeah, really?
There's another different revenue.
yeah, so like I mentioned, that any council action that sets up a special account such as those, it would still be handled via demand warrant process. We don't wanna intermingle the funds from this NC checking account system with any funds coming from any other department or council office. So we would go through the demand warrant process and make sure that the funds are spent specifically for what they were set up for.
And I do wanna clarify that every neighbor council who has such special funds, special accounts, we will be contacting you with information on how to access those funds.
Okay.
So it's gonna be
Request.
for all of us, not just
No,
for.
no, no, it's only for those neighbor councils that their council members transfer funds.
Is there anyone other than Zion that's giving that kind of money?
Well,
That's
Alarcon
not
has
free.
provided some funds to his neighbor councils, and then, I believe, Councilmember Corcoran will be doing a grant program for his neighbors.
And where's that money coming from in the budget? What part of the budget is that money coming from?
Street furniture, typically.
Some is street furniture, and I don't know about the other one.
Street furniture?
Street furniture, yeah,
What
so
was-
they get revenue from the street furniture.
Right.
I wasn't maybe told none of you had development facilities distributed.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. My request is, as you get questions from each of the neighborhood councils, and you make a determination as to that answer, can you share that situation with all neighborhood councils? So you won't get 95 questions?
Yeah, we happy to do that. So the request was, for those on the webinar, if you're still there, to share any, answers that we do for situations for neighbor council, so that, other neighbor councils can learn from each other. So we're gonna move on, and then we'll take more questions at the end.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into the treasurer and signer's duties as they set up the NC checking accounts. Okay.
Chief, my question was, is anybody required to stay?
No, this is only for treasurers and signers. If you're a board member who's not involved, not gonna be directly involved in the funding process, you fulfill your training requirement, you can fill out a registration form, and then you're done. Okay, so for,
Can you raise your hand so I know if you're leading?
okay, so let's get going. So in terms of setting up an NC checking account, the first step is to submit a board resolution indicating the selection or election of the treasurer and the signer. Attendance at a checking account and funding training such as this one. Completion of the bank application form. Signed acknowledgement with the department, similar to the acknowledgement form that you completed when you first signed up for the funding. We'll get those out by the end of this week. And once you're signed up, the department will notify the cardholder when the card has been received. And the monthly statements will be available online for download and will be posted on our website as well.
Am I gonna ask a question, or do I have to wait until we go into it?
Cash request form, this is the first of the forms that are used for this funding program. Like I mentioned, the initial seed money in July will be $4,000. And for any subsequent month, the treasurer would request additional funds from the city appropriation account using the cash request form. The request should be based on the approved budget. Department usually will process it within 1 to 2 days. The request should be made in the beginning of the month. And if there is a need, if there's something that comes along in the middle of the month, we have a special meeting and you approve for additional expenditures, you do have the option of submitting additional cash requests for the month based on those unforeseen expenditures. in your package, you'll find a copy of this form. You basically list the cash status summary for the budget. So column A would be based on your approved budget. Column B, cash received to date for each of the budget categories. The request for the particular month. And then simple calculation, budget balance available would be A minus B minus C. Treasurer and signer certify this document, requesting these funds, and then it's submitted to the department would review it, make sure that those funds are available, and that any reconciliation reports have been submitted for prior months, and then we will approve and have those funds into your checking account. The funding request form is a new form. The best way to describe it is a demand warrant to the neighborhood council. Okay, so any party that requests funds from the NC must complete one of these funding request forms. Prior to issuing payment for board approved expenditure, like I mentioned before, these following should be submitted to the department for review and authorization. So again, those are MPGs, neighborhood improvement projects, contracts, leases, NC sponsored events, and any expenditures over $2,500. Here's a copy of the funding. So this could be filled out, in theory, by a person requesting a neighborhood purpose grant, community, a person requesting, participation in an event. It could be the treasurer completing this form for an operations expense. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if this is a recurring expense like a web or utility bill, the treasurer fills this form out once, and only once, and enters the amounts and the term, so 12 months, whatever utility or some bill, and gets the board to vote on this. Once it's voted on and approved, there's a section underneath for the neighborhood council to sign and date and indicate their approval or denial of this request, or an amendment if it's an MPG and they decide to grant a lesser amount, you can amend that as well. And again, this is if authorization is required by the department, you submit this form. Very bottom, the department would identify the category of the pre-authorization request, sign and approve it, give the NC the authorization code, giving them the authority to expend the funds from their account. This is a board vote on the funding request, so each funding item that's voted on should have one of these completed by either the treasurer or the signer, depending on who assumes the responsibility of this. Again, indicating the vendor, the meeting dates, agenda item. And there's a list of 25 here, but we will provide this form online to be able to add additional rows if there are more than 25 board members on your board, or if you would like to submit 2 of these forms to cover all the members of the board. At the bottom is the neighborhood council certification, which takes the place of any board resolution that was previously submitted authorizing these expenses. Basically fill it in with the treasurer's name, the signer's name, and the details of the totals of the board vote for this particular item. In regards to the online bill payment system, once again, there are no physical checkbooks. Checks are generated in the Wells Fargo account website. The business, the delivery time on Wells Fargo says 2 to 3 days, but accounting for mailing and delivery, I would say 5 to 7 is a safer estimate. EFT, electronic funds transfer, is available for many vendors. If you go to their website, they do have a tutorial, and they show you how to look up some of the more popular vendors, AT&T, Verizon, TWP, there should be all listed there. So you can set those up to be taken out of the account on a monthly basis. Checks cannot be made out to cash. Based on requests feedback that we got from several neighborhood councils. We explored the issue of seeing if you can enter an online check and ask that it be mailed to the signer or the treasurer so that they can hand deliver the check to a vendor. Under certain circumstances, I know that this is a necessary thing, and I did confirm that that's definitely allowable through their system, so making you aware of that. And again, they have a very very nice online tutorial on how to use the online bill pay system. It's available on westfargo.com. In regards to the charge card, I have listed here the signer, but depending on if you're determined to be a card holder, they would be responsible for its security. They should not be loaning it out to anybody. Charge card usage should be limited to incidental uses only, where an online check payment would not be feasible. So at all costs, try and use the online bill pay feature for most vendors. You know that's not always going to be possible, but if there are, there may be fees associated with setting up a use of a charge card for a vendor. So if they have options where you can give them the account number and the routing number, provide a copy of the check, or set up the EFT, that's the preferred method to set up any payments. Request for increases, the maximum daily amount for incidentals on the charge card would be $500. Okay, so we have a $500 maximum allowance. Any requests for increases above the amount should be authorized by the department. It would be on a form similar to the P-card exemption request form that's currently being used. It's the same idea, they're requesting an increase for a particular reason, for a particular expense. The request is submitted on the form prescribed by the department, so I already said that. And the signer is responsible for collecting and submitting all original receipts to the treasurer or the recorder for the monthly reconciliation. Following uses of the charge card are strictly forbidden under any circumstances: ATM cash withdrawals, cash back requests, donations of money to individuals or groups, again, purchases of gift cards, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, adult entertainment products, use of the charge card at any gambling facility, casino, or any gambling purposes, be it online or in person. Without question, without excuse, without anything, the department will immediately revoke the card holder's card if any of the above uses are identified, and based on the severity, may revoke their rights to access the NC checking account. Okay, the monthly expenditure report. This is the report that reconciles all your expenses for the neighborhood council to the department, and it is the most important point. The deadline is 10 business days after the NC's regular monthly board meeting. So for example, you have your July's expenses and expenditures. In August, the treasurer or signer, depending on who's going to do the reporting, will report the July's expenditures to their board. The board will approve it, and then this form would be due 10 days after that meeting. Okay? It must be signed and certified by the treasurer and the signer, and include all relevant documentation for listed expenditures, receipts, invoices, flyers, funding request forms, board vote forms. For anything that required pre-authorization, we would already have that documentation with us. But anything that didn't meet those standards, like regular operational expenses that were under the $2,500 threshold, then you can submit that information at that time. Here's a copy of the first page, the front of the monthly expenditure report. You list your monthly expenditures. This form will be available electronically online, or if you print out if you prefer manually entering it. Preferably, it would be entered online, and we're working on setting up a Google Docs system where you can enter it and the department receives it literally as you're entering the information. It'll also be beneficial because it'll calculate totals for your behalf. You enter in the item, the service description, budget category, the name of the vendor. Indicate whether this is an out-of-state vendor. That's important because the city has to comply with use tax requirements. If this is an out-of-state vendor, the department would review this report and, work with the controller's office to identify if there is any use tax fees due, and we would adjust that out of your account. We would notify you of the use tax requirements and adjust that out of your account. Provide the invoice number and, whether this is 1099 reportable. Now, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this on the, funding request form, but that information is, requested from the party requesting that funding. At the top of the form, it says, you know, are you a board member of this neighborhood council? Is this a request, is this request a payment for services requiring a 1099? And is this request for an out-of-state vendor? So they're letting you know up front, so that should take some of the guesswork out for you as you're entering this document, whether it's 1099 reportable or an out-of-state vendor. If there are any outstanding checks that haven't been cashed by any vendors, you can list those under A2, section A2. Total it out. Enter in the cumulative expenditures from prior months. Any outstanding commitments, if you have a lease or a rental contract, and you know what you're going to be paying for the rest of the year for that, contractual services, large purchases, neighborhood purpose grants in process that you're aware of that are going to go through, but are, you know, pending maybe a contract or something like that. Those things can be listed here under section C for outstanding commitments. When you total it out at the bottom, you get a balance for the budget. The back page of that is a cash status analysis, similar to the cash request form, except you're looking at your budget, how much you've received for the month and what you've spent for the month, and the budget balance available. So it's basically looking at the balances based on budget categories as opposed to by expenditures. And then again, at the end, we do have the certification identifying when the board reviewed and approved this report. Signer and treasurer sign and date this form and submit it to the department. In the interest of meeting the deadlines, you can print and sign this, scan and fax it to us, and follow up with the original documentation in the mail. We will count it as received based on the date that you submitted it to us via fax or email. Okay, let's go into neighborhood purpose grants. Most of you are familiar with neighborhood purpose grants. Just talk a little bit about how it's changed under this current system. So neighborhood purpose grants are the only method for which neighborhood councils can issue grants to nonprofits and public schools from their NC allocation of funds. Anything over 5,000 again requires a city contract, so plan ahead and we can get that worked out for you. Anything over 20,000 requires city contract and approval of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. You still have a role in evaluating and approving these grant requests in the public meeting, making the finding of what the public benefit would be, identifying what the benefit to the community would be. Again, you have to have good fiscal standing in order to participate in the neighborhood purpose grant program. You have to have current fiscal budget on file with the department and not being under exhaustive efforts or funds frozen or anything like that in order to participate. And again, the conflicts of interest laws apply. If you have a relationship with a requesting school or organization, consult the city attorney before the item is ready voted by the board. Again, NPGs must be submitted to the department for review and approval prior to issuing a check from the NC checking account. The treasurer should submit the following: NPG application, completely filled out. And by the way, we are revamping the NPG application to include some additional information, disclosure about conflicts of interest, and other information that will clarify the process a little more and make it easier for you to evaluate it. W-9 should be completely filled out and signed. We do still require the purchase request and authorization form, I'm sorry, that should say funding request form. The board vote, 501c3 IRS determination letter if they're a nonprofit, or if they're a public school, it should be a letter requesting the grant on their official school letterhead.
What about their articles of incorporation? Well, some of these 501c3s, some other stuff that they require articles of incorporation. incorporation too, are we supposed to submit that?
We require just the 501c3 confirmation for that.
And letter.
Yeah. The question was, what about articles of incorporation, should those be submitted for the MPG? And the department doesn't require that specific documentation, so long as we have proof that they are a 501c3 as confirmed via a letter from the IRS, or if we can identify, we are able to look up on the websites to confirm their tax exempt status.
Marlo, I have another question for you. It's not the time for that?
Yeah, we're almost done, and then we can, Sean, you first, if that's okay. In regards to neighborhood improvement projects, all neighborhood improvement projects, again, must be submitted to the department for review and approval prior to issuing a check. This is something that kind of fell by the wayside in the prior funding program, and it's something that we really need to look at and make sure. So, when you're submitting it, these requests, make sure to include invoices, reports, surveys, proofs of insurance, and or permits that were obtained for these improvement projects. The last thing we're going to talk about is the inventory. This is pretty much currently existing information. The department will be looking at kind of revitalizing this inventory process within the next several months to kind of get neighborhood councils to look at what inventory they have in stock and have a better method of tracking and identifying that information. So just really quickly, if you have equipment that falls under any of these categories, value of at least $1,000 and an estimated useful life of 3 years, and computer hardware, desktop or laptop computers regardless of cost, digital cameras regardless of cost, any electric or electronic office and communications equipment should all be identified in your inventory list. You should tag them with an inventory tag as a unique identifying number, and submit this list to us on an annual basis to ensure that you're in compliance with city policies. And this is a copy of the currently available inventory form on our website. And that concludes our funding training. I want to thank you first of all for being patient and participating in this event. If you are on the webinar and you want to complete your registration form, please go to empowerla.org/board registration. I do want to point out again that these forms within the next week or 2 weeks will become available online on our website, as well as the policies and the procedures that we just discussed.
No. Oh, the linked accounts. Did you talk about linked accounts? Yeah. Well, you know what? Before we get, I know, folks on the webinar, we know you have a bunch of questions. I actually heard that you had some questions. What we're going to do for folks on the webinar, we're going to look through your questions and email you the responses to them so that you get your questions answered. We'll take some live questions here. But did you want to touch briefly on some of the linked accounts?
Right. So the linked accounts issue. If you have, and some of you may have gotten this information as you were setting up your Wells Fargo checking accounts, NC checking accounts. If you have a currently existing personal account with Wells Fargo, the Wells Fargo bank representative let us know that in terms of online access, when you log in to your Wells Fargo account, you will have the option of seeing both accounts listed, so you don't have to log in separately to each account. Now, we looked into this to make sure that these accounts, even though you have a personal account and now you have an NC checking account listed under the same login, are in no way linked. So there is no way possible to transfer money from one account to the other, or to enter it into there's no connection basically. The city NC checking account is set up under the city's tax ID, and that falls under the umbrella of the city, and it's not linked to your personal account. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and just so you know. Any questions?
Hey, this came up, and where it said that we cannot spend public funds on a private fundraiser. And our event we were talking about was that festival. But at a certain point, when does it become a fundraiser? And it's not covering the cost of the event? As soon as you hit 0, 1 in the black, does that make it a fundraiser now? Because you're trying to pull off an event and it has expenses. And you're working with these groups, and there's a wide variety of groups you're working with. And at the festival, there's vendor fees and things of that nature. And it was said you can't spend public funds on a private fundraiser. So at what point does it become a fundraiser? As soon as you get 0, 1 cent in the black, you
Well,
can't.
So you want to keep the question, so.
My question is, in regards to, events, that the neighborhood council either participates in or co-sponsors, when does an event become a fundraiser, and not permissible under the guidelines of the city on the use of public funds? My response to that would be actually that any fundraising element would be an issue that should be reviewed with, the city attorney beforehand, to make sure that there isn't an issue. It doesn't have to do with when the costs are recuperated or the black, or when you reach the black. A fundraiser is a fundraiser, and you should consult with the city attorney, to see if there's any way to fund those events.
I mean, if a
Maybe
sponsorship
as a
check comes
participation
in,
versus, like you
is that
mentioned before.
fundraising then?
So,
That's
so
the
I
question
can
I
give you some examples where there was money being raised, like I went to, a fundraiser that was for a school that a neighbor council participated in. They were a participant, they had a booth there. There was no entrance fee, it was free, and they were selling tickets for food, and they did a silent auction. So, in those cases, that's not, it was a fundraiser for the school, but there was no entrance fee, you didn't have to pay money in order to participate in this event that the neighbor council was a participant in. So, they start looking at, well, was there an entrance fee, like I have to pay some money in order to be a part of this event as a public person just walking in? So that's what the city attorney starts looking at, and they start building the case, okay, now it's hit a fundraiser when, someone just can't walk off the street and come in without, having to pay some cost.
So it doesn't have to do, say, a corporate sponsor comes in and puts money into the event.
No, they'll look at everything, but, we don't do the legal analysis, we literally send it over to the city attorney, and they look at the flyers, they look at the website, they look at everything like that, and then they determine at that point whether it's a fundraiser and whether it's disallowed. So, again, talk to us, at the beginning of the process, don't let us, don't let us know a couple weeks before your event, like, oh, okay, now we wanna do this, because then, if we find an issue, we'll always try to work with you to get your event going, because we understand that some of these events are great for your community and for your neighbor council, so we'll always try to work, and we'll try our best to work something out.
I wanted to, I was getting ready to ask this question when we was up on the slide, but I noticed here that you said that we have to submit a board resolution indicating the selection or election of the treasurer and signer. What if we've already done it? Do we have to redo that?
No,
We did it at the time of the election.
Yeah, we already have that board resolution, and this is for anybody who is going to be, new to the funding program in terms of everything, they're just been appointed or elected as a treasurer for the first time,
Okay.
then they have to submit that to us. But if you've already satisfied the requirement in the past, and there hasn't been any changes, then that's sufficient.
Along with that, if we're getting 2 new signers, we just send a board resolution approving those 2.
Anybody that's gonna be added to the funding program.
And what do we do if we have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What do we do if we have crossover? Our board meeting is until the 9th. So I think you've got a 6th deadline for something, July, something, anything? It was the 8th? Yeah, we don't meet until the 9th, so I think we're gonna be missing the deadline, so.
Well, it's not so much a deadline as opposed to the date that we can actually start up the new checking account
I see,
system based
okay,
on
so
the
it's not gonna
ordinance.
cause an issue.
Right.
I'm
understand that forms are forthcoming for availability. I think you mentioned that the expense one was linked to automatic monitoring by Dunn, is that correct?
Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to set up a Google Docs account, a spreadsheet where we provide the form, you enter the data, and on both sides, kind of like our NC check tracker that we have now, you can see in real time anything that's going on our side as well.
I'm a new treasurer, so anything
Oh,
before
okay.
is not relevant to me. But my question is, are the other forms, are they writable, like
We're gonna
the
make,
funding expense one and the
Yes.
voting one?
all the forms will be writable electronically, and you can print it out and sign it. That's great, yes.
Two additional question was, one on the funding request form. Requesting a it needs a 1099. Now, different people have different interpretation of
Yes.
what needs to be 1099. So are you gonna be giving clarifications
Yes, we're
about that?
actually, yes, ma'am, we're actually going to be providing like a one sheet on whether something should be reported in 1099, just a little bit of guidance. I mean, and if all else fails, if you're unsure, have them fill out the W-9, and then once it's submitted, the department and the controller's office can make a determination if it needs to be 1099.
Okay, and then my next question is, and I've brought this, I don't know if it was to your attention or to your predecessor, but, as far as, like, you guys only require a 501c, like, for us to give funds to a 501c, okay? And this is one of the issues that I had, was when a board member at another NC sets up a nonprofit, and it comes to several NCs up under his nonprofit and collects money. Okay, the other issue that I have too is that it says here that, anything over 5,000 requires a city contract. Now, are you guys talking about the individual, like, if, then we've also had this issue where we've had somebody come to us and ask us for money, and then go to 15 other NCs and ask for money. Okay, now they don't reach the $9,000 threshold as far as us giving them money, but cumulatively, they've reached that threshold. And what are you guys gonna do about that? Because that was something that I brought up before,
Yes, so-
that I think is being abused, because you have these people that are chronic, that will go from NC to NC to NC to NC and ask for money, and when you tally up the amount of money that they've gotten $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000.
So,
You might wanna repeat that question, so people can.
So the question is in regards to 501c3s and they're submitting NPG requests to multiple neighborhood councils, and what the department can do to monitor that, ensure that this is being done appropriately, or if it's being done inappropriately, what the city can do about that. So in regards to that, I would say that I'd have to look at the specifics, because if they're going to different NCs and providing possibly specific services or grants for unique things for each thing, then it wouldn't fall under one contract. If it is something like a particular project that they're pulling funds from everywhere, then yeah, we might want to get the city attorney involved to review that.
I think you guys should get the city attorney involved in it, because right now, the way that it stands is that when they come to our NC, they're gonna say, okay, well, we're gonna provide these services to you in your area. And they go to the next NC, oh, we're gonna provide these services to you in their area, okay? Now,
Right.
mind you, these are public funds, okay? They are restrictions, so they're actually, you guys are actually creating a gray area for them to operate.
So,
Okay.
number one, if you know of a nonprofit that's doing that, your board does not have to change this nonprofit
No.
fund,
Yeah.
just
I
don't give
But you
them
don't
funds.
always
I
know.
understand
Yeah.
that, but the problem
But-
is,
but
the problem is like what I brought to you
Right,
guys, okay, and I'm
well, I
not
don't know
gonna
what you're
rehash it here.
specifically, what you brought. But, well, just so we can move this along and we can talk specifically about it, we are looking at changing the application for the NPG to note what other neighbor councils are you requesting funds from?
Mhm.
And within the application or any other grantor that you're, cause when you try to get grants from other grantors, they actually typically ask that.
Yeah.
Who else are you asking for money, so we're gonna add that aspect to it in addition to the conflict of interest.
And then my second part to that question is, it's with the, yeah, it's gonna be shorter. Now,
Is this specific to your NC?
no,
Because
it's not
here,
specific, it's not specific, what, okay, I mean, others.
Yeah, they have their
others,
hands
okay. If, like with the Subway Coalition, the Crenshaw Subway Coalition, okay? Now, they're coming to us for funds, but they're using the funds to fight the city. That should be a no-no, right? Am I right?
You're not supposed to be using the funds to fight the city.
No.
But how are you, well, we need to talk specifically about that
Okay.
because we have to see how it's going around to kind of circumvent that policy procedure of the city.
Okay.
How many signatories can there be?
We're looking at that, we're like, two. It'd be treasurer and the signer. I know some folks want the flexibility, and so we'll look into it. The problem is you have too many people out there who are doing multiple things, like paperwork gets lost really easily. So come to us, if you have a special circumstance, let us look at it and then we'll see.
Something I've noted, this concern with, people take vacations. And there is possibilities, one of us could miss the deadlines that you have. And I just came off a 2-week vacation. So, someone may take a 3-week. So there needs to be some means.
Yes. Question in terms of, for the webinar people, is if there is a time period where one of the two individuals involved in the funding process is unavailable, and when we release the policies and procedures, we will have a system where the other party can kind of shoulder all the work during that time period, so long as it's a period of less than 30 days. Okay, so we will have a process developed where you notify us within 10 days that, hey, this person's out of the country, or they're gonna be out of town, they're in the hospital, whatever, unavailable, and then we can kind of reconfigure ourselves and help you get your funding stuff taken care of, working with just the available person.
We've already emailed you the Wells Fargo application, so you're gonna let us know what to do after that?
Yes, you'll get a confirmation from us about when the account has been set up, it becomes available for you. And the debit cards, the charge cards will come to the department, so you'll have to come in and pick them up, bring an ID to.
Or you can have Gracie deliver.
Yeah. Happy to do so.
Is it
Say
gonna,
that, I can say that.
is it going to be, the accounts held at Wells Fargo headquarters or individual branches that are close to each NC?
For what's?
For doing business, for any questions?
We will provide a contact that we work with directly in terms of the NC checking accounts. Most of your business should be able to be handled online. If there's an issue in terms of a lost card or something like that, contact the department as well, and we can work with you to get those mistakes done. I'm not seeing particularly why branch isn't.
Yeah, actually, you should probably never have to walk into the branch. We just don't see that you need to do that. Our whole goal was to make it online and convenient for you. So because you can do online banking over there, if you lose a card, you let us know, because we have to hook up your card back to the Office Depot discounts that you guys get, so, all the accounts actually are, the return address is to the department, because you can download your own statements from online, so you shouldn't have to ever actually walk into a branch.
So the bill pay will be on the NC account number?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
even though it's cross-referenced with my personal?
Well, it's not cross-referenced. They're
Well,
both
it'll
available.
show my personal, and it'll show
Well,
Dunn account.
there'll be a drop down.
Yes.
You select the NC account, and all the information displayed will be for the NC. There's not gonna be like a dual.
Yeah.
You can see your personal at the same time when you're looking at the NC account.
Okay.
It's two separate.
We need to wrap up, and then if you guys have additional questions, we're happy, Armando's happy to stay. I have an appointment at 8:30, I'm sorry guys.
But in addition, a lot of great questions came from those folks on the webinar, and so because we've got so many great questions, we're going to answer them in writing and just send them to all the
Yeah, we'll do
participants.
an FAQ.
So this is the first workshop, which means we'll probably accumulate some great questions, and then we'll just put them all together and let everyone have them. And Armando also mentioned that the slideshow and the documents will also be available. We'll send you the link. And then, very quickly, if I could, there's yearbooks waiting for you outside if you haven't already picked up yearbooks for your neighborhood council. There's some,
So they're only in English?
the next one will have more languages,
Okay.
including Australian.
Prefer Spanish.
There's also some worksheets for the strategic plan. It's available online, but there's some folks wanted some paper versions. There's a little info sheet on the upcoming 2014 elections. And most importantly, the Empower LA Awards are underway, and we would love to hear what great things your neighborhood council is doing. These awards will be given out at the Congress the fourth Saturday in September. So, thanks very much.
Can I add one thing? When you send an email out, could everybody please just reply to the sender and not everybody on the email, please?
Well, you'll put that on the website as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So don't worry about the email.
It doesn't matter.
Thank you, everyone. Make sure we get your form.
When you reply to all, everybody that's on the PCC.
Yeah, I am gonna look, but we
Well, that's the reason why we have our issues that we have.
Oh, thank you. Anybody who wants to.
Yes, I got that, I'll never do that.